Imagine this, a quiet church, the soft scent of incense filling the air, and suddenly, something incredible happens. The Crucifix of Córdoba, with its image of Christ on the cross, begins to change. Jesus, once motionless and burdened with the weight of humanity's pain, detaches from the cross. But what happens next is even more unbelievable, a miracle. Have you ever thought something like this could happen? Something so unusual, so rare, but with an immense transformative power. This story isn't just about faith, it's about witnessing the impossible unfold before your eyes. If you're someone seeking to understand the true power of God's grace, this story will deeply stir what you believe to be possible. Are you ready to discover what happened? The Crucifix of Córdoba stands out because of its unique portrayal. Unlike the traditional representations of Christ on the cross, with arms outstretched, this one shows him with his hand pointing downward, as though giving a direct divine instruction. This image isn't just an artistic adaptation, it's an invitation for the viewer to reflect on a gesture that transcends tradition. Anyone who comes across this crucifix is quickly challenged to ask, why is this Christ acting this way? The gesture, different from anything we're used to, breaks any notion of passivity. Instead of immobilized suffering, there is movement, there is direction. And the reaction of visitors is immediate and profound. As they observe the crucifix, people unknowingly encounter a powerful symbol of action and urgency. The finger pointing downward seems to indicate a message of spiritual direction, as if Christ is calling everyone to move toward something deeper. Those seeking answers feel drawn to this representation, perhaps seeing a reflection of their own quests and doubts. This unusual movement of Christ, in contrast to his traditional image, unsettles those expecting to contemplate suffering. Instead, it offers an invitation to transformation. Something new begins to form in the minds of pilgrims and devotees who encounter this sacred icon. The reaction of visitors is a testament to how religious art has the power to stir the soul. Instead of mere observation, many are driven to question their own journey of faith. This crucifix is not just an object of worship, it's a meeting point for deep reflection. Christ's gesture challenges the observer to consider their own life's path, to examine their actions, and to question their purpose. Who could have imagined that such a simple, subtle movement could spark such a powerful reflection on faith and destiny? How could this gesture, silently, speak directly to the hearts of those seeking something greater? The legend surrounding the Crucifix of Córdoba is deeply moving and reveals one of the most fundamental aspects of the Christian faith: forgiveness. According to the story, a man, tormented by his sins, visited the church in search of redemption, but felt that his heart was irreparably closed to forgiveness. He had confessed countless times, but the priest's words seemed to have no effect on him. Until, in a moment of desperation, he encountered the crucifix, and looking at Christ's gesture, something changed. The crucified Christ, instead of looking upward, seemed now to be gazing directly at him, with an expression that conveyed mercy and understanding. This look made the man feel, for the first time, the possibility of divine forgiveness. As the legend spread, pilgrims began to speak of the miracle in that gesture. For many, Christ's hand pointing downward represented not only divine instruction but also a practical action of forgiveness. It was as though Christ himself was saying, "You are forgiven, and this forgiveness has no end." For that sinner, the moment was a turning point, for the sensation of being forgiven truly transformed him. He experienced forgiveness in such a tangible way that he became a new man. And it was through this miraculous event that the story of the crucifix began to grow stronger, passed down from generation to generation as a symbol of God's unlimited forgiveness. Thus, the legend of the Crucifix of Córdoba is not just a story of personal transformation, but a lesson about the reach of divine mercy. It teaches us that no matter how much guilt or regret we carry, there is always room for forgiveness. Christ's gesture points to the fact that forgiveness is not a transaction between two parties, but an immeasurable gift that must be accepted with an open heart. This is what draws pilgrims to that sacred place. They don't just seek a story of redemption, they seek a true experience of inner healing, an opportunity to find lost peace. The miracle moment involving the Crucifix of Córdoba left everyone present in awe. The figure of Christ, which had remained motionless until then, began to move his hand in a clear gesture of forgiveness, something none of the faithful had ever witnessed before. The priest, who was watching the scene, was paralyzed. He knew he was witnessing something supernatural, something that transcended human logic. To him, that gesture wasn't just a manifestation of mercy, but also a sign of divine power itself, a confirmation that God's forgiveness knows no limits. It was as if Christ was personally extending his hand to each person present, calling them to a deeper experience of faith. The people in that chapel could not help but feel that something extraordinary was happening. The environment, which had previously been one of ordinary prayer, transformed into a center of intense reflection and spiritual renewal. Christ's gesture touched everyone's heart directly. Those who were lost in their prayers, seeking answers to their troubles, felt an inexplicable peace take over their hearts. It wasn't just the symbol of the crucifix that brought this peace, but the living presence of Christ, manifesting through that miracle, touching souls with the gentleness and power of his mercy. The impact of the miracle wasn't just momentary. It extended into the lives of the faithful who witnessed the event. Many, upon leaving the chapel, spoke of profound changes in their hearts. Christ's gesture, moving his hand downward, came to be seen as a sign that forgiveness is accessible to all, at any moment in life. For those who were trapped by the mistakes of the past, the miracle was a call to renewal. What once seemed impossible now became a tangible reality. Forgiveness isn't something we have to earn, but something we can receive from God at any time, with a repentant and open heart. The impact of the Crucifix of Córdoba was profound and didn't just affect those present at the time of the miracle. As word spread, more and more pilgrims began visiting the chapel, seeking a transformative experience similar to what they had heard about. With each new devotee who approached the crucifix, stories of life changes emerged, of hardened hearts that suddenly felt touched by divine grace. Many reported feeling immense peace and, more importantly, forgiveness for their failings and sins. This process of personal transformation didn't stop with the individual, but had a multiplying effect on the local community, which saw a significant increase in charity and the spirit of reconciliation among its members. Over time, the crucifix became a symbol of spiritual and communal renewal. Those who reconciled with God and their own shortcomings sought to help others do the same. People felt more inclined to forgive one another, and old disputes, which once seemed insurmountable, began to be resolved. The community, once marked by distrust and conflict, experienced a true revolution of hearts. As a result, many new practices of worship and service to the community began to emerge. People gathered for joint prayers and moments of reflection, encouraging one another to live according to Christ's principles. The impact of personal transformation also reflected in the way the faithful dealt with daily difficulties. Many began dedicating more time to spirituality, and the number of prayer meetings and Bible study groups increased significantly. The words of Christ, represented in that crucifix, became a guide for daily life. Forgiveness, now lived out practically, was no longer an abstract idea, but a principle that guided people's actions. Those who once saw their mistakes as insurmountable barriers now viewed difficulties as opportunities to grow spiritually. And so, the crucifix not only transformed lives but helped to transform the very essence of the community. The impact of the Crucifix of Córdoba didn't go unnoticed by scholars of the time. A scholar, known for his deep understanding of theology and the history of religious art, decided to investigate the phenomenon. He carefully studied the accounts of the pilgrims and the miracle witnessed by so many, seeking to understand the transformative effect Christ's gesture had on the penitents. Delving into the scriptures and religious practices, the scholar concluded that the crucifix was more than just an object of worship. It was a point of contact between the divine and the human, a means through which people could experience God's forgiveness and grace in a tangible way. The scholar's study led to the creation of a series of vigils and communal prayer moments. He recognized that the gesture of Christ represented in the crucifix was a call for all to approach God with a sincere heart, open to forgiveness. The scholar suggested that, in addition to individual prayer, the community should gather regularly to meditate on the meaning of forgiveness and divine mercy. This led to the organization of spiritual events in the chapel, where people could share their experiences and seek a collective spiritual renewal. This movement generated a growing religious fervor in the region, with the population becoming more committed to Christian teachings. The scholar's work was essential to the perpetuation of the crucifix's transformative power. His study not only helped to understand the phenomenon, but also provided the foundation for the community to continue feeding spiritually from the miracle that occurred. He came to be seen as a spiritual leader, guiding the faithful in their journey of faith. The scholar also played a crucial role in consolidating the idea that spirituality is not an individual and isolated experience, but a shared one that grows stronger when lived in community. The scholar's deep analysis and practical application of Christian teachings ensured that the miracle of the crucifix transcended time and remained alive in the hearts of those seeking a transformed life. The power of forgiveness was revealed in an extraordinary way in the context of the Crucifix of Córdoba. Pilgrims from all over the world came seeking healing, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual. And that's precisely what they found. Forgiveness, often an abstract concept, was materialized in a tangible and profound way at that sacred place. One striking example was that of a young woman who, after suffering a devastating betrayal, found in the crucifix a sign that she could forgive and move on. Her heart, once heavy with pain, began to open up to true healing. Christ's gesture, with his hand pointing downward, seemed to say, "You can leave this behind. Forgiveness is the path to peace." Another touching testimony came from an elderly man who had carried the bitterness of a quarrel with his son for years. Sitting before the crucifix, he felt, for the first time, that he could release the resentment that had been eating him up inside. Looking at Christ, he saw a reflection of divine mercy and realized that forgiveness wasn't just for others, but also for himself. This reflection led him to reconcile with his son, turning a lost relationship into one of renewal and love. For him, forgiveness became the catalyst for a new phase of his life, marked by peace and harmony. Even more remarkable was the story of a soldier, traumatized by the war, who sought relief for his spiritual and emotional wounds. He carried the horrors of battle in his soul, but as he approached the crucifix, he found not only relief but also a renewed sense of purpose. Reflecting on Christ's gesture, the soldier understood that forgiveness was the key to freeing himself from the chains of the past and beginning to rebuild his life. Every story shared by those who sought forgiveness at the crucifix served as inspiration for others to also find a path to healing and inner peace. Forgiveness, therefore, is not just a spiritual practice, but a true tool for personal and communal transformation. The Crucifix of Córdoba not only represented a symbol of faith, but it also became an icon of spiritual transformation that anyone could experience, regardless of past failures. The message that divine grace can restore even the most broken souls is a deep lesson that resonated with the pilgrims who passed through there. In a world that often judges and excludes, the crucifix stands out as a reminder that no one is beyond the reach of God's forgiveness. Like a beacon of hope, it drew those who, in some way, believed that their lives were already ruined. The sight of Christ pointing downward, with his hand extended, gave a tangible sense that, even in the worst of conditions, grace could still reach the hardest of hearts. Often, true spiritual healing begins when we recognize our own limitations and allow ourselves to be vulnerable before God. Like the story of a pilgrim, who, after years of living away from the church and its Christian values, found in the image of Christ what he called the awakening of a new life. Forgiveness, which initially seemed like a distant concept, became a concrete reality for him. He found healing by allowing himself to be touched by divine mercy. The message that, no matter how lost we may be, there is always a way back, is the essence of the true healing spirituality that the Crucifix of Córdoba represents. This vision of forgiveness and healing isn't limited to the individual experience. Over time, people began sharing their stories, creating a continuous cycle of hope and renewal within the community. When one soul heals, it becomes an instrument of healing for others. This is what was seen in the prayer gatherings that began to form around the crucifix. The spirituality of forgiveness and healing, exemplified in Christ's gesture, spread like a sacred fire, illuminating and transforming lives. The healing process, though painful at times, brings with it true liberation, the opportunity to live with a light heart, free from the weight of guilt. Religious art has always played a fundamental role in living out faith, serving not just as a means of expressing devotion but also as a channel for spiritual transformation. The Crucifix of Córdoba clearly and impressively exemplifies this influence. It's not just a decorative or worship object, but a work with the power to touch the deepest emotions and provoke spiritual reflection. Religious art, like the crucifix, serves as a meeting point between the human and the divine, challenging viewers to reconsider their own beliefs and convictions. Every detail in the figure of Christ, with his hand pointing downward, carries symbolism that transcends mere observation, leading the faithful to a deeply immersive experience of faith. This interaction between art and spirituality happens not only through the aesthetic beauty of the work, but through its ability to communicate divine truths in a deep and accessible way. The Crucifix of Córdoba, with its singular gesture, touches the soul of anyone who observes it, challenging them to reflect on forgiveness, divine grace, and their personal journey of faith. Just as a painting by Van Gogh can capture the essence of a sunflower field, religious art, when genuine, has the power to capture the essence of Christ and his mission. Christ's figure, with his gesture of forgiveness, is like a living painting, inviting each person to draw closer to God and reflect on their own spiritual walk. Through these artistic representations, Christians are invited to approach the divine nature of Christ in a more tangible and personal way. Religious art is a form of visual meditation, where each look, each expression, each gesture communicates a spiritual teaching. The Crucifix of Córdoba, with its imposing presence, is a true masterpiece of faith that instigates deep introspection. It becomes a vessel for spiritual transformation, leading the faithful to reflect on the deeper meaning of Christ in their lives. With this, religious art not only elevates the spirit but also illuminates the path of faith, leading Christians to a more intense experience of connection with the divine. The confessional, traditionally seen as the space where the faithful seek forgiveness for their sins, holds a fundamental role in spiritual healing. However, it's not just a religious practice of confessing wrongs but a process of inner renewal. In the context of the Crucifix of Córdoba, the confessional becomes a symbol of reconciliation not only with God but also with the soul. The priest, as the intermediary of divine grace, doesn't just absolve sins, but also helps the penitent understand the depth of forgiveness and its impact on their spiritual life. When entering the confessional, the individual seeks not just forgiveness for past deeds, but a new chance to live according to Christian principles, renewing themselves with each confession. From this perspective, the confessional becomes more than just a place of forgiveness. It is a space for emotional and spiritual healing. The person confessing their failures, fears, and anguish before God opens themselves up to a process of self-awareness and liberation. By recognizing their limitations and asking for forgiveness, they begin a journey of transformation. The very atmosphere of the confessional, marked by intimacy and seriousness, contributes to the healing experience, as it allows the penitent to confront their humanity and seek genuine change. Thus, the confessional becomes a place of acceptance, where words of forgiveness and reconciliation become means for true renewal. The bond between the confessional and spiritual healing is a continuous invitation to reflect on life and faith. When the penitent approaches the sacrament of confession, they are not only seeking absolution but also allowing themselves to restore their relationship with God and others. The Crucifix of Córdoba, with its gesture of forgiveness, further amplifies this meaning, reminding the faithful that forgiveness is not an isolated act, but a continuous process of transformation. The confessional, therefore, becomes a place where healing goes beyond the absolution of sins, touching the depths of the soul, restoring inner peace, and strengthening the faith journey. Forgiveness is often seen as a one-time act, a decision made in a moment of repentance. However, the true essence of forgiveness is understood as a continuous process of personal transformation. Looking at the Crucifix of Córdoba, it becomes clear that Christ's gesture of pointing downward symbolizes more than just momentary forgiveness. It suggests that forgiveness is a journey that leads us to healing and inner change. Forgiveness is not only a release for the other, but, above all, a release for ourselves. When we forgive, we allow the weight of resentment and hurt to be lifted from our hearts, making space for peace and spiritual renewal. This process of transformation begins the moment we decide to forgive. However, forgiveness often doesn't happen all at once. It is something that deepens over time as we gradually free ourselves from the shackles of the past. The stories of many pilgrims who visited the Córdoba chapel show that forgiveness is a process that involves both action and reflection. It's not easy to forgive, especially when we are hurt in deep ways, but by forgiving, we take an important step toward our own healing. The Crucifix of Córdoba, with its gesture of mercy, teaches that forgiveness is not a concession but a liberation that benefits both the offender and the offended. However, forgiveness is not just a personal process, it is a factor of communal transformation. As forgiveness spreads, it creates a network of healing that can reach many people. When someone forgives, they inspire others to do the same, creating a multiplying effect of divine grace. This movement of forgiveness and transformation can, in turn, renew not only the individual but an entire community. The Crucifix of Córdoba, by inspiring forgiveness, helps create a culture of reconciliation and peace, where everyone, instead of being divided by grudges, comes together through divine grace. Forgiveness, as a process, becomes a catalyst for a true and profound change in life.